Federal Drive is presented by GEHA, Government Employees Health Association, proudly providing health and dental benefits to federal employees and their families. Visit GEHA.com.
The Trump administration will have to deal with vacancies in the ranks of inspectors general. The last time around, the Trump White House had sort of a touchy relationship with some of them. Here with one view of what should happen next, the Director of Effective and Accountable Government at the Project on Government Oversight, Faith Williams. Faith, good to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right, what should happen with inspectors general? Because this is just an ongoing topic, I think, with every administration.
It is. The Trump administration is not necessarily unique in our concerns about the independence and accountability of inspectors general. So one thing to note is back in the first Trump administration, Trump fired 5 inspectors general. He did it at like 5:30 p.m. on a Friday afternoon, the classic Friday news dump. And nothing like that had happened since President Reagan, all the way back, 1980, when President Reagan comes in, asks all presidential appointees to resign, including inspectors general. There was a big outcry from Congress, and he ultimately hired, I think, 5 of them back. So that sort of sets the stage then. Fast forward 2020. In the first Trump administration, I believe it was 2020, though, President Trump fires 5 inspectors general. And so POGO and other organizations get to work on strengthening the rules and protections around removing inspectors general. And though progress has been made, it is better than it was. The protections are stronger, but it is still really easy for the president to remove an inspector general for just about any reason that they want. So there's a real concern that when President Trump takes office again, he will remove inspectors general, if not wholesale, then many at a time with abandon for not necessarily great reasons. So that's our concern.
Inspectors general do report to the president and to the agency head. They've kind of had a dual hat or a dual reporting split relationship. And that's been one of the challenges, I think, right, for inspectors general, is that they are presidentially appointed. So I guess the question is, how are they different from any other appointee in that they serve at the pleasure of the president?
Sure. And I think that's a great constitutional, sticky wicket right there, is that they do serve at the pleasure of the president. There are some constitutional concerns about making it even harder to remove inspectors general. But the fact remains is that these folks are absolutely critical to uncovering waste, fraud, and abuse in government. And so it is really important that presidents let them do their jobs. And ultimately, when it becomes clear that an inspector general is not doing their job, it's really important. It is important for a president to remove them. And we see that with Inspector General Cuffari at the Department of Homeland Security. So we're not saying, hey, never get rid of an inspector general. We are saying that there needs to be a really good reason when a president goes to remove them. But you're right that the president, still they serve at the pleasure of the president at the end of the day. So that is challenging.
And POGO has been kind of picking at this Cuffari issue for a long time now, and it comes and goes in the rest of media and so forth. What's the current status with him? What are the issues?
Yeah, great question. So the SIGI, which is the body that helps hold inspectors general accountable, released at long last a report on Inspector General Cuffari earlier this fall. It had been in the works for 2 years, and the report goes to the president, in this case, of course, President Biden, and it encouraged President Biden to take steps up to and including removal. That's a big deal. SIGI investigations are typically, we find that presidents are relatively responsive to those. But what we've seen is still no movement on IG Cuffari. So despite the many issues that POGO has long talked about, that POGO has uncovered, that different members of Congress have uncovered, and despite the SIGI report finally coming out, Inspector General Cuffari is still at the Department of Homeland Security.
We are speaking with Faith Williams. She's director of the Effective and Accountable Government program at the Project on Government Oversight, and looking at potential Trump appointees and this whole issue of he can be mercurial with people that he appoints, and they come and go sometimes, or at least that's what they did in the first administration. Inspectors general look at the operations of agencies, but they're not really policymakers. And don't they investigate, in some cases, some instances, the performance of the agency per the policy that the White House might have set through the secretary?
Absolutely. And that independence is key. I think, as part of the American public, we deserve agencies that are fulfilling their mission, where fraud is not occurring, where corruption is not occurring, and IGs help hold agencies and their work accountable. And I will say that one kind of nuance that exists within inspectors general there are rules about who can be nominated to be an inspector general. The idea is that they have, qualifications in the fields that IGs need to do their job. So things like audit background or investigatory background. The president or an agency head, there are some limitations on who they can nominate to be an inspector general. For example, having an audit background or an investigatory background. So there are some limitations as to who can fill the role of inspectors general.
All right. And the CIGI, you mentioned that they have been effective in the sense of other IGs and administrators and presidents listening to them. What should they do to make sure that great appointees get appointed and that the ones that are pretty good stay in their jobs through the next transition to the next administration?
Sure. Well, there's only honestly so much CIGI can do. CIGI can't do much to ensure anything, right? I mean, because ultimately these inspectors general serve at the pleasure of the president. But CIGI, for the last few years, I think since 2022 reforms were passed, where CIGI helps recommend candidates for IG vacancies. And that's generally a good thing. It doesn't mean the president needs to listen or take that into consideration, but I think having a pool of qualified candidates is never a bad way to jumpstart the process. I also think CIGI continuing to investigate where there are issues is really important to. We talk a lot about the independence of inspector general, but they also need to be accountable. Inspectors general are not inherently any more perfect than any other people. And so it is really important that there are mechanisms in place to report when there is a bad inspector general, and what do I mean by bad? Someone who is corrupt or who is retaliating against whistleblowers or isn't investigating the important issues, kind of you name it. So that mechanism is really important. And CIGI has faced a lot of backlash from some members of Congress because of the IG Cuffari investigation, because some folks felt that it was more of a political investigation. I think, not to put words in other people's mouths, but that's been my interpretation, is that some folks felt that CIGI was going after IG Cuffari because he was a Trump appointee, and now we're in, the Biden administration. But the truth is, CIGI, that is not why CIGI was investigating Inspector General Cuffari. There are real issues there. And so it's really important that CIGI continues that work. And in fact, they put out a really great guide a month or two ago on presidential transitions and just the importance of, say, the transition team meeting with existing inspectors general so that the transition team knows kind of big management concerns or big problems that they're working on. So there's so many ways that CIGI has been helpful, and inspectors general have this role to play in the transition as well.
And it's important for every agency to have one because the vacancy issue has been dragging on for years and years, decades.
Correct. It's really important. At the moment, there are 11 vacancies. One is very fresh, but the oldest one is years long. The majority of them, I want to say of these 11, eight or nine, I have it up on my computer, but 8 or 9 require a presidential nomination. The remaining require an agency head nomination. But we really need nominations. And so there are 11 vacancies, some of which have nominations at various stages in the Senate. 2 of those folks are ready for floor votes. We've encouraged the leaders in the Senate to hold floor votes on them. But there are others that don't even have nominations. So it's really at like a whole mix. And so that will continue regardless of administration. POGO wants these vacancies filled. And so just like we've encouraged President Biden to fill these vacancies, we'll certainly encourage President Trump to fill these vacancies.
Faith Williams is director of the Effective and Accountable Government Program at the Project on Government Oversight. Thanks so much for joining me.
Oh, real pleasure to be here. Thank you.
And we'll post this interview at federalnewsnetwork.com/Federal Drive. Hear the Federal Drive on your schedule. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.